So we have understood about single inheritance as we have taken example of a single base class and two subclasses, right? So now if we clearly observe in the previous videos when we have worked on teacher class and student class, we have inherited the student class from teacher class. You can just revise the previous videos or just check the Python files, because clearly all the methods and variables in those methods of teacher class, which is the base class, because we have taken, right? So teacher class is the base class and available to the student class. But the other question is, are the constructors of the base class accessible to the subclass? Now we'll answer that question where we just write a Python program to access the base class constructor from subclass, because we will have constructor overriding when we declare another constructor in the subclass. It's something fishy or interesting, right? No worries, we'll just work on it. So I'll just keep the above cells as commented. Even you can just see the line numbers also. You can just customize it when you can just go to the options and show line numbers. You can just customize. It's up to you. How do you see it? So now my intention is to make it understand, are the constructor of the base class accessible to the subclass or not? So what we do is we create a Python program to access the base class constructor from subclass, where I take two related things, because always if you see from the starting of the object-oriented programming concept, I am relating it to real-world scenarios, because the main intention of OOPS is you have to understand the real-world scenarios or creating as an object or real-world names. That's where I've taken banks and teacher, student. Now I'm taking one more thing related to father and child, because I'll define a class which is the base class named as father. So first let's write to create a Python program to access the base class constructor from subclass, because the main reason is we will be understanding how does the constructor overriding happen when we go for inheriting the properties, inheriting the constructors, inheriting the classes, inheriting the methods from base class to child class. That's what we will see now. Base class constructor from subclass. No need to worry, just make it simple. You can just refer the teacher class and student class once again. You'll be easy, because we'll try to create a super class by name father. So I'll just give the class name as father, and whether you declare object in it or not, because it's fine whether you initialize at the end or the syntax is same. So class father of, that's it. I define a constructor here, so that is dunder in it, and we would like to pass only self here, because I would declare the attributes or objects within it. That is, I would like to declare the property. So self dot property, that means father is having the property of around 8 lakhs. You can take any number. I'm just taking a simple number. So 8 lakhs. That's where this father and the other thing is child, because father class has a constructor where a variable is property. It is declared and initialized. That is, property variable is declared and initialized. That's what we are doing in dunder method. Property variable is declared. I'll just keep property variable is declared and initialized. So that is the reason I am making it very simple. Even you write the docstring here, demo, it's fine. You can write your own name. It's up to you, whatever the program you are relating it. So property variable is declared and initialized. That's fine. Now what do we do is, it is initialized with 8 lakhs value. Now when we create another class, that becomes subclass when you take father as a class son of father. It's fine, right? But what I want to see is, I would like to declare one more method, which is nothing but display method, to see the result. So I just define the method name as display. You can give any names, it's up to you. So never worry about the names, only worry about the logic of the code. So define display property, because this is nothing but the instance method. So you just want to see the result of the properties. So I just give print of father's properties. So if I want to use again apostrophe here, I can just give slash. So that's what we have seen the syntax also. So father's property is, or father's property is equal to quotation close and comma, and you access the method here, variable here, self dot property. It's fine. So now when you call this, when you initialize this object, a is equal to father, you get display property. You know that result already. But now what I do is I create one more class, which is son class. This becomes subclass when you take the father class here. So when son is created from father, that means son of father. So obviously what happens in the previous video only we have seen about the class method. Now obviously self dot property, right? So this constructor is by default available to son class. It's already available because if I define pass, because I don't want to create any other, we don't want to write anything in subclass. That's where we don't want to write anything in subclass. That's where we use pass as syntax, right? That's what happens mainly in classes when you declare pass. Whether you declare in the functions also, it is fine. I don't want to write anything in subclass. So what I do is I just create an instance. I create an instance and display father's property. So for that I need not call father only, I can just create with son. So I create a subclass instance. I create subclass instance and display father property. Let's see. And I want to display father property. So writing comments will make you enable, so you understand the logic everywhere whenever you see it. So s is equal to, I call this son, I initialize the object son. So when I execute it, how do you access the method? So you just go for directory of yes, there you go. You have property and display property. So when you go for property, you should be able to see the value within it. What is the value? It's 8 lakhs. Very good. And s dot display property, you should be able to see the print statement in it. Very good. Father's property is equal to 8 class. That means like variables and methods declared in the superclass, constructors are also available to the subclass, which is by default. That's what happened here, right? Because I just gave pass, so you're able to access the constructor also. That is very, very key point. I'll just make a note of it. So like the variables and methods, even constructors in superclass, constructor in superclass is available to subclass by default. Constructor in superclass, we can write constructors in the superclass. Constructors in superclass are also available to subclass, by default. Now what happens if we declare another constructor in the subclass? That's where you will be finding much interesting, which is constructor overriding. Let's declare that thing also. Subclass object by default. That is a very, very key point. Just make a note of it, because we did not declare any methods or any objects inside son class, because we are able to access both property and display property from the father class, because father is superclass, son is derived class. Because now as simple, so variables and methods, we can also access constructors. But now when a programmer or when we try to write another constructor in the superclass, let's see, that's where overriding of superclass constructors will happen. Overriding superclass constructor. But how is that possible? I'll prove it. You need not worry. For everything, I'll make it practical then. So what I want to do is, I'll just keep this as comment, but I just wanted to use the same thing. I just copy the same thing here. To make it very simple, we'll just copy the same thing still here. And I create the same class. So class of father, demo 2 you can write. So constructor property variable is declared and initialized, and define display property. But now what we do is, we take class son of father, obviously, because this is a subclass and that is a superclass. But now instead of using pass, I would like to declare a constructor here. That's where writing a constructor in the subclass, the superclass constructor is not available, because you are declaring a constructor in the subclass. That's where subclass constructor is replacing the superclass constructor, which is called as constructor overriding. But how is that possible? Let me prove it. So I define a constructor. So define double and under init of, you just pass self to it and should declare the property. So I want it because that means son has earned some property. In that way you relate. So till now he is depending on father with 8 lakhs, but now he started earning and he has earned around 2 lakhs. Very good. He has earned around 2 lakhs. Now what I want to do is I just wanted to declare a method. So define display property, or whether you define any other name, it's fine. So define display property of, you just wanted to see the result. So print of, now it is son's property, right? Or I can make it as child's property. Child's property is equal to, now you can just give self dot property. Now let's see, when you initialize a subclass instance, that is when you create a subclass instance and define the father property, you cannot see it. Let me prove it. So I'll just give S is equal to, or C is equal to son. Now I'll just execute this and I'll go for directory of C. Obviously you'll be seeing property and display property. That doesn't mean that you are accessing superclass constructor. No, because when you go for C dot property, you will be seeing 2 lakhs. It's not 8 lakhs because the constructor in the superclass is not available to subclass now, because subclass constructor is replacing the superclass constructor. We have created a constructor and method with the exactly same name as those of superclass, right? When we refer to them, only subclass constructor and method are executed. Now if I would like to see the result, so C dot display method, you could see only child property. When you execute without giving parenthesis, it's a bounded method and class is son, display property is a method, and that's an object bitcode format. So that is the reason parentheses play a very vital role. There you go, child's property is 2 lakh. But how can you access parent class here? You're not able to access the constructor in the parent class, right? Now if you define D is equal to father, if you define in this way and execute this, again you go for directory of D, you get D dot, you get property, display property. Now you can, because you are accessing it to another object, you can clearly see the result, but you're not accessing from the child class. That's what my intention is, right? You have declared, you have created another object and initialized it, you can access it, but you cannot access as we have created a constructor and a method in the subclass with the same name. So when we refer to them, it is unable to fetch the constructor from the superclass. So that is where the constructor overriding is happening. So now we'll understand how does this overriding should be done and what, when and how we can modify that, which we will be understanding by working on super method, because we can do it as the overriding is happening. We can use a super method where we can call the superclass constructor also. That is where we can use it. So here we are accessing the overriding superclass constructors and also methods because we have defined same method name. What happens if we don't define same method name? You see, now I'll go for it. I'll execute this. I'll go for directory of C. There you go, display property. Now you see display property, that is from the parent and this is from the child. Let's see, I'll go for C dot property. So C dot property, you get 2 lakhs. First access the method in the child class. C dot display property, you should see child's property. You are expecting that you could see result from the parent class. So when you access this, what you are getting? Father's property is 2 lakhs only, because you have defined the same method, same object, no? That is where overriding is happening, because father's property is not 2 lakhs, it's 8 lakhs. That's where overriding is happening, and we can understand how we can modify that, how we can modify the existing behavior of a constructor or a method when we call some super method, because super method is very useful when we need to call the superclass constructor or method from the subclass, right? So make it very simple. Even if you change the method names, you could see only the object which is the constructor in the subclass is only used, because that is replacing the superclass constructor. So that is how constructor overriding is happening.